The violent demonstrations of neo-Nazis and white supremacists in Charlottesville, Virginia last week has sparked outrage and reopened debates about the current state of race relations in the United States. Senator Cory Gardner was among the first Republicans to criticize President Donald Trump, his initial comments, and how the president has doubled down on those remarks since then. Ed, Charlottesville has, well, it's become its own verb now, or it's become, you can just say that. Everyone knows what you mean. Just say Charlottesville. From everything that we've seen from it, not only the president's reactions, but everybody else's reactions, both sides of the aisle, what do you take away from everything we've seen so far?
That's a huge enveloping question there. I think what you take away is a lot of things that have been said that shouldn't, things that haven't been said that should. I mean, let's face it, when someone like Doug Lamborn comes out and criticizes Donald Trump for being racially insensitive in his comments, you know you've blown it. Look, let's put this out here first. There are a couple things that should be said. That you know, while there were mostly very peaceful counter-protesters, that group did include violent thugs like Antifa. So there were some of those elements out there. Also, I think there should be pushback, and Trump's not even trying to do this, against the emerging storyline that this shows America is just a racial war morass right now. This was still a gathering of 250 people that had been advertised nationally. So not exactly the Women's March in terms of getting the national sentiment stoked here. This is still a small, fringe, anachronistic group of lunatics that we're talking about. That said, Trump hasn't said that, and he should. That's where he's really fallen down in this. Is he's had the opportunity to criticize people who are beyond any question troublemakers here. And let's remember some of the important facts that he's not making in his statements about both sides were at issue here. First of all, it's not like the violence broke out because these were a group of people walking down talking in historical perspectives about why Confederate memorials should be out in public squares. These are people who began the march by spewing racist and anti-Semitic barbs. That's something Trump has failed to acknowledge. Also, while we should actually be putting some more criticism toward the Charlottesville Police Department for failing to step in any way to bring this down, the actual violent act that has focused our nation on this was perpetrated by a 20-year-old Hitler fanatic. He should be saying that as well. I mean, there is plenty to criticize here. He's not doing it. And frankly, what I'm left with in the aftermath of this is there will be time to talk in the greater picture about how America's political conversation has gotten out of control and must be brought back down to a more civil discourse. However, the need to blame these people for causing this is there right now, and he's failed to do it.
David, this seemed to me like a good week for Cory Gardner. While a tough week with this town hall, which we will get to as a topic, seeing his name as one of the very first Republicans criticizing Donald Trump's comments on CNN seemed like he was able to get out there in front of it and actually make some hay, even before Ted Cruz said what he did. Will that last as a way for Cory Gardner to distance himself from the president if he still wishes to do so?
Well, he's been distant from the president for a long time. He was one of the last Republican U.S. senators to endorse Trump. So good for him. For over a century, there has been a political faction in this country. It got to a peak of its power in the 30s, but is having something of a comeback these days of fascism. And its characteristics are hatred for the Constitution, anti-Americanism, anti-patriotism, racial privilege, anti-Semitism, including the desire for the extermination of the state of Israel. This faction is ultimately is empowered by not only this current president, but other politicians as well over time. It is run by the father of lies, the great deceiver, and accordingly, to confuse even its own vile adherents, there are two factions of it. One is the brown fascists, the types like the Ku Klux Klan, the neo-Nazis, and so on. And the other type is the red fascists, the communists, the so-called anti-fa. That's the anti-fascist. That's like John Caldera naming himself anti-bald. They are left-wing, red, totalitarian fascists. And both sides have perpetrated violence, like the two journalists at Charlottesville who got beat up by the peaceful Antifa thugs. This country is moving in the direction of the Weimar Republic in the 1920s, of clashes between the two ostensibly different wings of the fascist party. And people on all sides need to stop empowering them. And that includes not only the Republicans, except for President Trump, have done a good job of calling out some of them. The Democrats need to do a better job of calling out the fascists who are ostensibly on their side.
Craig, I thought you had some great comments on Next with Kyle Clark about this whole issue. He talked to you about this. When you look at the whole week and the reactions and the doubling down, where are you at from what you've seen?
Well, first of all, I don't know that I'm the biggest booster of Donald Trump, but I did vote for him over Hillary Clinton, and I don't really envision Hillary Clinton doing a great job in the wake of Charlottesville either. But my gosh, President Trump was so disappointing. And it was stupid what he did. He had a golden opportunity. He could have said the right things to bring the country together. When you get a chance to condemn the Nazis and the KKK, take it, for God's sake. And he didn't do it. It's like watching a guy with a 2-foot putt. He putts, he doesn't even hit the hole. Then he took a mulligan, which apparently he does a lot in golf. And on Monday, he got it in the hole. But he, inexplicably, went after it again on Tuesday, and he missed the hole again. What's wrong with this guy? You know, to say the good people were at that torchlight parade with those anti-Semitic chants, any good person would have looked at those Nazi flags, KKK emblems, and said, I don't want to be part of this. So what were you talking about, Mr. President? And Heather Heyer, she was the victim. He should have embraced that. There was Antifa, there were other organized violent people, but Heather Heyer wasn't a part of that. It was a Hitler-loving 20-year-old scumbag who did it. What an opportunity President Trump had, and those opportunities don't come around so often. It was just stupid for him to miss it.
Mary, we've seen a lot of issues come out of this, not just about Donald Trump's comments, but now getting into Confederate statue removal, and whether the different states talking about that, and even statue controversy is not something new for Colorado. When you see between the comments, Confederate statues, everything in between, what do you take away from what we've seen this week?
Well, in Colorado, the discussion that Black Lives Matter, what some people call a hate group, others call an activist group, they got going a great conversation about whether the name of Stapleton should be changed, given that Mayor Stapleton was a high-level member of the Ku Klux Klan. But this week, a lot of people reached out to me because as a journalist and as a human being, I've been very outspoken with my views on Donald Trump. And frankly, anyone who voted for Donald Trump, I think does not have the right to criticize what he is saying now on Charlottesville, because where were people who voted for him, whether it's media or citizens, when he was right here in Denver, over in Lowry, doing very similar things at his rally here in Lowry, just to give one example. He stoked the crowd to start booing and hissing at the Hispanic media. He spent a good portion of that rally reading a poem in which he described Syrian refugees as snakes. He has been dehumanizing many groups since long before he became president. So when people reached out to me this week and said, what do you think? What's your take? You've said that you think that this president dehumanizes many human beings for a long time. I said, I'm not paying much attention to it. This is who we got into office. I am not surprised. And the world is saying this is a turning point. This is a real shame if the president is not outright denouncing neo-Nazi sympathizers. Well, we had it coming. We elected him to office.